Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fresh Poets Society, this time in podcast form. For those of you who are new here, the idea behind this project is to get all of you guys writing and submitting poetry, and then to build a community of people who help each other grow and improve with a real focus on constructive feedback. This is both for people who've been writing for years and for those of you who've only just discovered poetry. You know, there's no barrier to entry, no elitism, no silly questions or ideas, nothing like that. Everyone and anyone can get involved. Poetry is a huge passion of mine, and I want to share that with you guys. I know it can be intimidating. I know poetry can seem like this big, scary thing, but please believe me when I say poetry really is for everyone. There is something for everyone out there, and that's what I want to try and share with you guys. So, with the Fresh Poets Society, every month I give you guys a prompt and you submit your original poems for us all to discuss. Last month, you guys seriously impressed me with your isolation-themed poems, and this month was absolutely no different. I think this month I got around something like 240 incredible poems submitted with the theme of kindness. But before we get into that and take a look at some of your poems from this last month, I want to announce that next month's theme, or this month's theme that you can be submitting right now, is courage. And excitingly, this month I am also going to be accepting short story submissions, because as well as poetry, I love a good short story. So if you want to go send me something, head on over to racheloates.me/freshpoetsociety. That is racheloates.me/freshpoetsociety. And there's different forums there. There's a poetry one, there's a short story one, there's also some random discussion forums. So head over there, get involved, should be fun. And with that, let's have a jump into your poems. So the first one I want to discuss today is titled Sonnet Number 2, and it is by S.A. Young. In her mind she rows across a vast sea of sailors long past, drowning in their woes. Lay your heart to rest, I call out to thee. She cannot save all, for there cry the crows. My lover's soul is deep, blue evermore, and man cannot understand her crying. Relinquish those harmed, and harm nevermore. Stand for colours of others, those dying. Those sailors past of falsely accused crimes would surely see her as a strong ally, marching through the streets and singing her chimes. To match her love I fail, but I do try. Her kindness I worry, too deep to bear. Never would I change her love is rare. Now, as you could probably tell from the title, this is a sonnet, and sonnets, as you may know, are a very popular form of poetry. They're beautiful, they're easy to recognize, and they can be incredibly emotive, but they're very difficult to write well because they tend to have fairly strict rules to follow in terms of structure and format, which is why I seriously applaud this poet for doing such a great job with this sonnet. So different types of sonnets will follow different rules when it comes to things like rhyme scheme, number of syllables in each line. So for example, a typical Shakespearean sonnet like we have here, or at least this is a good attempt at one, consists of 14 lines with an AB, CD, EF, GG rhyme scheme. And each line is written in iambic pentameter, which means each line has 10 syllables made up of alternating unstressed and stressed syllables. So these are like the da-dum, 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 if that makes any sense. I really hope it does. So like I say, this poem here, Sonnet Number 2, is a wonderful attempt at a Shakespearean sonnet. It's got the lines, it's got the rhyme, it's got the 10 syllables per line. I feel like in some of the lines, the stresses are a little off in places. So as one example, let's take a look at that third line, right? The lay your heart to rest, I call out to thee. In iambic pentameter, the stresses fall on every second syllable. And this is really useful and really important because it can be used to really emphasize the meaning of certain words in a line. For example, look at something by Shakespeare where he says, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. So here, the iambic pentameter naturally stresses all the important parts. The first syllable of mistress to tell you who the poem's about. And then in the rest of the line, the focus is on eyes, the first syllable of nothing, like, sun, far, red, her, red. That second syllable stress is so important for putting the emphasis in the right places and getting the meaning across. But in the poem, or at least in this line of this poem by S.A. Young here, it's kind of backwards. Lay your heart to rest, I call out to thee. With iambic pentameter, the stresses fall on your, to, I, out, and thee, which doesn't really tell you anything. With this sentence and what it's trying to, or this line and what it's trying to tell you, where the natural stresses fall and the bits we want to emphasize, what we should be emphasizing are the words like lay, heart, rest, call, those big powerful words. So if you want to use iambic pentameter to really get the point across in a line like this, you just need to do a little rearranging, a little syntax juggle, and get the emphasis in the right places. Something as simple as changing it to, I call out to thee, lay your heart to rest, fits way better with the iambic pentameter, really gets the point across. But then you have the issue that the rhyme scheme's off. So then you need to go back and have a think about the first line and how it fits with the third line, or maybe change a word in there somewhere, or, you have this whole thing to fix and change and think about. Like I said, sonnets are so difficult. And don't get me wrong, this is an absolutely fantastic attempt at one. And there are plenty of places where the iambic pentameter is spot on, like in the lines, her kindness I worry too deep to bear. Perfect. But in the lines like the third line that we spoke about and a couple of other places, there are just a couple of little niggly bits that need a little bit of work. They don't quite flow right, don't quite deliver the right punches in the right places. But I do see a hell of a lot of potential here, and I absolutely applaud the poet for this amazing job. As a first draft or a draft of whatever, wonderful. There is so much to work with here, and it's fantastic. Also, this is hard to show in audio form, but there are a couple of little spelling and grammar errors here, like the wrong spelling of rose, and I think the wrong past is used like past with a T instead of an ED, or the other way around, I can't remember. It's just tiny little things. We all make those kinds of little mistakes and typos. They're not a big deal, just something to be aware of when you're editing this work, if the poet is listening, whatever. Anyway, with that, next poem I want to talk about is a poem called The Treasure Box, which was submitted to the forums by a user who goes by Introverted Hedgehog, but who also goes by the username Geeky Dreams over on Amino, and Sweet Ophelia 4231616 on DeviantArt. If you want to go check out any of their other stuff, please go ahead, do that. The poem they submitted, they wrote a little kind of like background to it, and they said, I find kindness hard to come by these days. This is my attempt to express that in today's society. Kindness and empathy sometimes feel like old vintage things about to be shelved, relics from another time. And I think that's kind of fantastic. That's something to bear in mind as we listen to this poem. And it's also worth noting that this poet here, still quite new to poetry, and English is not their first language, so that's worth bearing in mind when we listen and give feedback on this absolutely fantastic piece. I went to the attic to listen to the silent secret stories that old things will whisper, to those who can speak the sacred breathless tongue of bittersweet memories. A fancy dress frozen in time, once the height of fashion, now a feast for hungry moths, its faded fibres filled with the fleeting impression of a first kiss. A music box tainted with tarnish, tinkling out of tune, as a tiny girl in a tulle skirt twirls and twists and turns to the gentle timbre of a clockwork orchestra. A globe of a world gone by, my fingers tracing travels as it spins round and round on an old rusty axis, across incorrect borders rewritten by history. And there, in the corner, half hidden, forgotten, a treasure box without a lock, and inside, as if lying in wait, the humblest, most modest of finds, and yet the most precious of all. Someone else's shoes in which to walk a mile, scuffed and patched and frayed with 1,000 laboured footsteps, while mine was spanking new and polished to a shine. I took the box downstairs, so kindness won't become an old discarded thing, a ghost of days long past, ill-suited to our modern age and left to collect dust, like a wilted daisy chain left over from last spring. A telephone token in the age of touch screens, or a bright red yo-yo with a broken string. Now, maybe I just like this one because I have a real soft spot for lots of consonants and assonants and half rhymes and all that fun stuff that really makes a poem kind of flow and fun to read. But I just absolutely adored the imagery in this poem and how lots of tangible objects were used as metaphors for intangible things, you know? And I think this really becomes apparent in lines like, someone else's shoes in which to walk a mile, scuffed and patched and frayed with 1,000 laboured footsteps, which to me suggests that the shoes are a symbol for, empathy. And therefore, by accepting the shoes and not forgetting them, we remember to be compassionate and kind. You know, the lines about a fancy dress frozen in time, once the height of fashion, now a feast for hungry moths. That, I'd suggest, the tangible dress is a metaphor for the intangible concept of the fleeting nature of beauty and how, it never lasts, it fades. And sometimes there are more important things to think about, Yeah, there's a hell of a lot I could talk about this poem, and honestly there's not a whole lot I would want to change. Maybe I would like just a little more contrast in that last stanza or two in terms of juxtaposing images of modern and older objects. Instead of just mentioning a telephone token in the age of touchscreens, you could go into a little more detail about, contrasting something like the cold, hard glass of a phone or whatever, compared with the sturdy, warm wood of the treasure box or whatever. I'm not sure on the specifics. So that's why I kind of want to pass this one over to you guys listening and watching. What would you like to see in this poem to improve it? How would you improve it? Is there anything you'd like to change or take out or, alter in some way? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And also start to have a think about the meanings. What are these different items metaphors for? Being able to understand and analyze the work of others is a really, really important step in creating your own writing. By being able to recognize the tools, the techniques that other people put into their work, you can start to figure out how you can put them into your work and why they're important, why some things work, why some things don't, and you can use that to create better work yourself. You can have all the creative ideas that you want, but if you don't understand the techniques that I guess you have to use to express them or encode them into your work properly, then, they're always just going to remain as ideas and they're not quite going to make that jump to art, So next up, I want to discuss a poem titled What Do You Call Coming Down from a Sugar High, which was submitted by a user with the name 404 Caitlin Not Found. Great username, I love that. And I both love this poem and the backstory behind it, right? So this user wrote that when I was taking a poetry workshop course a year or two ago, there was one guy who would only describe girls in his poems with food metaphors. It always rubbed me the wrong way, even though he thought he was being kind by doing so. So when I saw the kindness theme, I wanted to turn it on its head and this came out. I mean, who hasn't met a guy like this, right? The ones who kind of objectify women and treat them as objects and... often sex objects and reduce them to nothing more than their looks or their appeal to a man, but they think that if they wrap it in enough compliments, then we're not going to see the misogyny, We all know a man like that. And you seriously kind of you get it in this poem. You recognize him straight away. It's wonderful. It's brilliantly done. So let's have a read. You say this is kindness, feeding me the words that you think I want to hear, telling me that I'm dipped in butterscotch, that my voice is honey sweet, with chocolate hair, mint eyes, and cream skin. But you prefer your cream whipped. And as strawberry swirls bloom over my arms, you tell me I'm your precious little sugar pearl, that my script was written on a candy wrapper, and all I had to do was follow it. When I try to argue, you tell me I'm cold as peppermint, that I'm supposed to be sweet and voiceless, so you can just eat everything that once made me. Eating candy isn't cannibalism after all. I am caramel dripped, drowning in vanilla and molasses. You say this is kindness, keeping me tight-lipped so I can never strip this candy skin. Seriously, I think this is wonderful and so powerful, and you really hear the kind of resentment in the narrator's voice, not in a bad way, she should be resentful of someone talking about her like this and treating her like this, you know. You hear that she realizes how awful this man is, you know, comparing it to sweets and candy and all these kinds of food as honestly a way of dehumanizing her, showing that he sees her almost as like, I don't know, childlike, lacking agency, something only there for him to control, use, and enjoy, you know? And you kind of hear the sarcasm in her voice, and you hear her strength as she kind of realizes throughout the poem that, hey, this isn't right. And for that reason, I think it's a wonderful feminist piece. Very strong, fantastic, you know? And I like the way it tied into the kindness theme, kind of tipping it on its head by showing that his, I don't know, either naivety or just pure condescending manipulation, you know, in lines like, you say this is kindness, keeping me tight-lipped. And I think it's really good how she's tied into the theme, but I'd kind of like to see this taken a little further, you know. Add another stanza or two where she really, really does flip his attitude kind of back on him, you know, kind of like a no you, really showing him how wrong he is, you know. Give the narrator some real power, let her rise up and say, no, screw you, I do have agency, I am strong, I'm more than just these images you're kind of plastering on me, you know. Have her say, you think this is kindness? I'll show you kindness. And then she educates him, you know. Talk about how she's not just cream to be whipped, she's not just a sweet voiceless treat, she's her own strong, independent woman. That's kind of what I want to see in maybe an extra stanza or two, you know. And I would stick with the food imagery as you do this, but maybe move away from the kind of sweet foods and candy and go for other things, maybe more natural foods like fruit or vegetables, or just something with a little more strength, you know. Talk about how, I don't know, you can be as sharp as a lime. You've had to build up a skin as thick as watermelon. You can be as nourishing and comforting as a home-cooked roast dinner, or as bitter as a raw gooseberry, until you're treated right. I don't know exactly, they're just ideas. But the thing is, definitely stick with the food theme, because food is so evocative in poetry, because it's something we can all relate to on one level or another. We all have emotional connections with food, whether that be good or bad. Different foods evoke different emotions. We all kind of relate differently to it. And food appeals to so many of our senses, you know? Smell, taste, touch, sight, even sound to some extent, but maybe that's just me because I hate the sound of other people eating. No. But there are a few things that can appeal to so many senses like that, and the fact that food can makes it such powerful imagery, and you can create such powerful metaphors with it in your work when you do it well. If you want a little inspiration for something like this, I would look at poets like Grace Nichols. Like, you guys know, huge Grace Nichols fan. I love her. I'm a little obsessed. She often uses food imagery to express her feelings, to connect with the audience, and at times to even describe herself. So look at the opening lines of a poem like Even Though, which exemplifies this perfectly. She says, man I love, but won't let you devour, even though I'm all watermelon and star apple and plum when you touch me. It's amazing. There are so many poems, not just this one, where she compares her own body to food to show how desirable and beautiful and natural and real she is, while maintaining this control over her own body. And it's so inspiring to hear a woman talking about herself like that. It's wonderful. On the other hand, there are these poems where she uses food to describe things like memories she has of home, of her childhood, of growing up, and showing contrast between cultures. For example, in one she talks about leaving an art gallery to, I think it's the Beacon, I think. I'll look it up and leave it in the notes if you're watching this on YouTube. But basically, she talks about leaving an art gallery, going out to buy like plantain, and I want to say like saltfish and stuff like that. And basically, it's this wonderful contrast between the culture in England, where she lives, and Guyana, where she was born. And it's fantastic. It's like a meeting of these two worlds and these two cultures, but also the contrast, and how she feels kind of homesick and a little bit out of it, and it's kind of jarring. And she's basically trying to make these two parts of her identity work together, and she's expressing this through food. It's fantastic. Grace Nichols, genius, seriously. But for other examples, you can also look at poems like Bernadette Meyer's We Eat Out Together, which has lines like, my heart is a fancy place where giant reddish purple cauliflowers and white ones in French and English are outside, waiting to welcome you to a boat of the low black river for a big dinner. or Christina Rossetti's incredible work, Goblin Market, which has these sensual and seductive images of fruits. And I'm just going to read you a really short extract here, but it's quite a long poem that is fantastic, absolute genius. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will leave a link to this poem down in the description below. Please go check it out, it's wonderful. Come buy, our grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp bullaces, rare peaches and green gages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try, currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to tongue and sound to eye, come buy. Wonderful. Food is such an evocative thing in poetry, it's fantastic. Also, sorry if you can hear Kyra's grumbles in the background while I'm recording this. Little girl snoring in the bathroom and it just echoes through the entire flat. It's quite funny. Next up, I want to very quickly mention a poem submitted by a user who just goes by Cecilia, which is titled Kindness in Eternal Bloom. There is a place in every heart that is dedicated to a special art. It takes time and care and effort to prepare, and everyone must do their part. Some people seem to stand by as their rooms continue to dry. They close their eyes and ignore the cries from those hurt by the reluctance to try. When I was learning how to stand, I created the first green strand. Leaning on a wall, I looked at my ball and gave it to an outstretched hand. As I grew, I started to experiment. Over pots, one would find me bent. Though some species died, others still reside in my room where they cover the cement. I have tried poppy, pathos and rose, and planted grass to feel with my toes. But opinions range, and I try to arrange my room to fit every nose. For once, I received a plant in a pot, and it twisted my stomach into a knot. I tried to smile as I tossed it on a pile and used it as compost after letting it rot. For flowers are grown to share, but with people they are difficult to pair. I try my best to excel at this quest and minimize any despair. Maybe one day I'll stand in my room, surrounded by flowers and trees that loom, looking around and hearing the sound of kindness and eternal bloom. So Cecilia, who wrote this poem, said that it's about growing into a kinder person and about navigating the kindness you give and receive. The stanzas are meant to be read as limericks, however they may not all adhere perfectly to the rules. And I found this really, really interesting, this kind of format. I don't really see poems with this structure very often, and so it kind of stood out to me. I definitely kind of found it very fun to read. It definitely flowed really well. It was pretty great, you know. We've discussed plant meanings before in some of my videos, or rather plant meanings in creative writing. For example, in my video analysing Oscar Wilde's short story, The Nightingale and the Rose. So I don't want to go into too much detail here, kind of regurgitating what I've already said, but if you are interested, again, I will leave that video linked in the description below. If you are listening on podcast form, on whatever format you listen to podcasts in, please go check out my YouTube channel, search my name, Rachel Oates, that's Oates, and I'm sure you will find the video on there. So, plants and their meanings are really, really useful, and they can be important in creative writing, and they're great. And I feel like the one thing I'd like to see out of this poem is maybe a little more reference to specific plants, playing around with including some different plant names and descriptions, and, you know, taking their kind of traditional meanings and making connections in this poem. Maybe exploring those references and their traditional meanings might be a direction you could take this poem in if you wanted to, you know? Talk about people giving roses, people giving carnations, people giving lilies, blah, 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 and what they mean. I mean, they're just some examples, but there's a lot you could do with this. You could talk about plants that are given for friendship, for sorrow, for grief, for loss. It's just something you could do to make this a little more and add a few more layers into it. You know, that's all. And finally, I just want to end this kind of video, podcast, whatever, by reading a couple of other submissions which stood out to me. I'm not going to talk about them in any kind of detail. I'm just going to leave them open for you to discuss. First up, there was a poem by Marie-Madeleine du Beausoleil. I really hope I've pronounced your name right. And it's called Depending on the Kindness of Strangers. And it's one of the shorter submissions I got this month, but it's one which I think is really, really powerful and has some great imagery in here. Do not depend on the kindness of strangers in the dark, because your dearest paper moon will be gone in a flash. All the pretty things, all the draperies, leaves with the lark's song at the star dawning new. And you won't have time to say goodbye until all the feelings, the memories, turn from pearl to swine to bone to ash. Do not depend on the kindness of strangers in the light, because the sun is distant for a reason. Be careful what you take, lest you forget the flame is hot, or love from sweetness, or left from right. Soon the things you treasure start to change, and you find yourself with nothing but a dream from which to wake. Pretty beautiful, but I definitely love to hear your thoughts on this. Tell me down in the comments, especially if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, head on over to the website, rachellutz.me, and, have a look around the forums. Share your thoughts on there. What do you like about these poems? What are your favourite lines? What do you think the meaning is? But also, how would you improve them? What techniques do you think these poets could look at and kind of try and learn a little bit more, try and practice a little bit more? Would you like to see certain poems going in a different direction? Would you like to see certain techniques used or some little bits taken out or edited? Please give your feedback, because this is all about learning and helping everyone create and creating a really, really supportive community. Serenity, meanwhile, fantastic username, I love it. It's like Serenity, but with T-E-A, like the drink. Love it because I'm English. Sorry. So Serenity, meanwhile, wrote this fantastic poem called Rebirth, which they describe writing as, and I quote, a form of self-therapy to teach myself self-love and kindness, which is always, always something I can get behind and support. They also included a message to the reader of, and I think this is lovely, I hope you know that you deserve to be happy, even if your trauma still lingers or recovery seems out of reach. In this love letter to you, I hope you can be patient and, most importantly, be kind to yourself. And I just thought it was lovely, like I say, and it's something really important and something that I want to share with you guys in this podcast video, whatever. So yeah, let's have a read of the poem. This is Rebirth. You think your tears are weakness, your screams a symptom of helplessness. But you see, it is not the flower's fault for being trampled on by the feet of careless strangers. Others have seized your throbbing heart, devoured all the love it has to offer, scraped honey out until there was nothing left, and left behind only the dirt of their fingernails. You should not carry the burden of shame or guilt that others have abandoned in your chest, because you are not Atlas, and you don't owe the world an ounce of remorse. The truth is, ever since you were brought into this world, your defiant wails have been a sign that to cry is to be alive. So, when you're ashamed of your tears, remember that water is what allows flowers to thrive, and that even amidst the harshest devastation, you will find daisies growing in between concrete's crevices. When your roots are torn and frayed, it's up to you to make a home out of concrete and have the courage to grow. I just thought it was a really kind of powerful message, and yeah, I'm impressed. And finally, the last poem we're going to be reading today is one titled Mirror, Mirror on the Wall by a user who goes by Roses into the Abyss. You guys might know I have a huge, huge, huge soft spot for fairy tales. You know, the dark original tales, the kid-friendly ones, the Disney adaptations, and any type of modern reimagining or retelling. I love them, obsessed. So this poem here was definitely inspired by Snow White and, you know, the Evil Queen's magic mirror. And I guess that's kind of why it stood out to me. I kind of feel like this kind of reminds me of some of Caroline Duffy's work, especially in The World's Wife, or even like Angela Carter's short story collections in things like The Bloody Chamber or the fairy tale rewrites and stuff that she did. So yeah, I got some of those vibes from this, and that's why I want to share it. Pretty great. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's as rotten as you, as broken as blue? No one, Mrs. Red. It echoes above my head. Mirror, mirror on the wall, do I wilt before your eyes, or do I bloom before mine? What am I to make of this shiny reflection in the abyss? Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me what you see, what you feel, what you need. You're the fairest of them all, only takes your eyes to see. Tell me, does the nightingale lament, or sing a moon's ode? content? Tell me, does the lion roar in anger or protect loved ones in danger? Tell me, do I show the real me or only what you want to see? Tell me what I see, what I feel, what I need. Whose reflection shines brighter if not for yours? Who is as righteous, as joyous, as fun, as true if not for you? Who's as caring, as sharing, as just and loyal? Your love is royal, your love is kind, and you shine, and you shine. Yeah, serious Caroline Duffy vibes there. I think it's great. There's a couple of little places there where the rhythm feels a little off, it maybe could flow a little better, but on the whole, brilliant. Love it. Yeah, and there we go. This is where I'm going to end this today. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening as a podcast. But either way, if you are new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me. If you want to stay up to date, you can also find me on Instagram at Rachel Oates, but with a 0 instead of an O. So that's RACHEL 0ATES. And don't forget, you can head on over to racheloates.me, that is RACHELOATES.me, to submit your original poems and short stories for this next month's theme, which is courage. Interpret that theme any way you want. Be as literal or abstract as you want, and I am genuinely looking so forward to reading all your work. But until next month, thank you so much for listening. Stay inspired, keep writing, keep encouraging each other, and please be safe, be happy, be healthy, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.